Hi, I'm Kurt Wilson, Mayor of the City of Roswell, Georgia, and welcome to Chats with the Mayor. This is our third installment, and this afternoon we're at lovely Mimosa Hall, and I have the great pleasure of having our Fire Chief Joe Pennino join me, and Councilmember Lee Hills, the liaison for public safety to both police and fire. Thank you both for joining us. And obviously, I would be remiss, Lee, if I didn't mention that for some reason, this is our third installment. And the fire chief, obviously being the prima donna that he is, has decided to put himself in the first position and has put the council member on the out. So this is the third installment. But it's not unusual for Joe to kind of do these things. We're kind of accustomed to it.
We are. It flows.
We are absolutely. But Joe, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah.
Lee, thanks for being with us.
Wouldn't miss it.
You guys are awesome. And in all seriousness, Joe, you've been with us now a year.
1 year, yes, sir.
It just happened. We just celebrated your 1 year anniversary. But I think the residents not everybody's got a chance to know you. And obviously, everybody loves the fire department.
Sure.
Fire departments are stars everywhere. The poor police guys, they get pushed to the side and they gravitate to you guys. And obviously, that's why the police chief is very jealous of you, Jim Conroy, as you know.
Correct.
But why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and where you came from and how we were fortunate enough to get you as our fire chief?
So I was born and raised in Pinellas County, Florida. Moved here from Clearwater just over a year ago. I have about 20 years of experience in the fire service in Pinellas County. I have some family members still there that are in the fire service, including a brother. How I got to Roswell, I was in a doctorate program at Valdosta State University, and in my cohort was the public safety director of Alpharetta. And he knew I liked the area and I was interested in getting a fire chief position in the area. And he called and said, hey, I just had lunch with the Roswell police chief. And he said, they're looking for a fire chief. Had great things to say about the city and the geography. So I said, what the heck? I grabbed my wife and we came up for a week to see the city and just absolutely fell in love with the city, the surroundings, and the people, really genuine people here. So we took a leap of faith and I applied for the position, ended up getting the position, and we moved up, my wife and I. The rest is history. She's a nurse practitioner at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and we've been married for about 16 years now.
Do you have children?
No children.
No children.
One cat.
One cat. What's the cat's name?
Hazel.
Hazel. How old's the cat?
Old.
So, by the way, it's folks probably don't know that. What's the number one call that you get in the fire department?
So we actually get a lot of false alarms.
False alarms. Sorry, after false alarms, but in relation to how many people don't realize that you still rescue cats today.
We do. Now,
in all seriousness,
you call, we'll go.
Yes,
we're all about the customer service.
It is really amazing. Like the Roswell Fire Department in the year 2022. Still, like in the old 1950 shows where they show the firemen showing up and saving a cat, the Roswell Fire Department really does today still show up and save cats.
That's true.
It's pretty amazing.
Now, there is an old adage that we like to say, have you ever seen a cat skeleton in a tree? And the answer is no. So they can't get down on their own. But if you call us, we'll come out and help out.
So how many calls a year do you get to save cats?
It's not that many. But we do go out for a variety of different things. We had one just the other day of a baby deer stuck in a storm drain. So we had to get the deer out of the storm drain, return it to its mom.
Wow.
And that's, I think, part of the reason we're the favorites, because we do things like that.
Well, obviously you're no stranger to the camera. Police Chief Jim Conroy is obviously, he understands that you have a relish for the camera and you can't get enough of it. We can't see enough of you on social media. Lee, I don't know, what do you do with this guy? I mean, this is all the time. He's on social media, he's on the camera, he's doing interviews, just did one yesterday.
Yeah, you just celebrate. He's always pushing the fire department, explaining what's going on, and it really isn't all about him. It really isn't. But just pointing out what's going on in the department, how your guys and women are supporting our residents in every way, and tuning up, listening to your staff and making sure that their needs are met in order to serve our residents.
Absolutely.
It's huge.
Chief, how many fire stations do we have in Roswell?
We have 7 fire stations.
And how many pieces of major fire equipment do we have?
Whew, we have 7 engines, 1 engine at each station. We have a ladder truck on each side of town, so 2 ladder trucks, 2 rescue units, which kind of look like ambulances. And then we have a special rescue unit, or we like to call it a heavy rescue. It has a lot of specialty equipment. We had a call just the other day. We had to rescue someone that was actually impaled on a pry bar. So that's where that specialty equipment and the specialized training comes into play. We're very fortunate to have that asset in Roswell. And we also have a battalion chief vehicle. So that is the on-duty chief at all times that goes to structure fires and is command of those incidents.
Lee, we kind of talked about this with the police, but you have a passion for supporting the fire department and all the great work that you're doing. And we're going to talk about some of the things you've done from a leadership perspective in the politics of the city in the last 6 months. But speak a little bit about your passion about the Roswell Fire Department.
Absolutely. I've got 2 kids that are now in college, and my son, I actually just sent a picture to Chief Pennino this past week. In his 5th grade farewell book, it said, "What would you like to be when you grow up?" And he said, "A fireman or a policeman." Mm-hmm. So my son has had a fascination with your department before you even got here, as well as Chief Conroy's. But it's very comforting to know that we have that protection that's ramped up, ready to go, trained up, and on call 24/7 for our residents. For me, I've had the fire department come to my house twice in 21 years, and luckily everyone survived prior to you getting there and after, and that's a big deal to know that was right there on the spot. So our residents feel that way as well, and having been involved in our school districts, our schools in the district for many years, listening to other parents say the same, it's not a tape recorder. It's the real deal. We absolutely want to support our fire departments and make sure that you guys are functioning well so that we can all go about our daily lives, knowing that you all are ready to go for us.
Joe, you can help. I know you can address this a little bit, but in January, when Lee first came into office, I think at the very first city council meeting, Lee and our colleagues were presented something to take care of. Can you kind of address that, which is amazing? It's kind of like this immediate commitment, I think, of Lee and the city council and the elected leadership to say, let's get on this. Fire department needs it. Can you address that as soon as they got into office?
So I would assume you're talking about the staffing model.
Yes.
Yeah. So the Roswell Fire Department was founded in 1937. It was established as an all-volunteer fire department. As the city grew, it kind of transitioned to a part-time fire department. And as the cities around us continued the transition into what we would say is a typical full-time fire department, the city of Roswell just kind of continued to build out the part-time model. So what that looks like is we have approximately 200 to 225 brave men and women that serve the citizens of Roswell. But they work full-time at one of about 20 different fire departments in the metro Atlanta area. So they go to work there, they do their normal shift, and then they come to work here at Roswell immediately following their 24-hour shift.
So just make sure I understand. So you're saying that I've got this incredible Roswell Fire Department with these incredible people here, but you're saying that most of them, this is not their first place where they work?
Correct.
So, and you're saying they work somewhere else?
Yep, that's right.
So they work in another fire department? Do they work there part-time or do they work there full-time?
So they work here part-time, they work full-time at the other fire department.
So the Roswell Fire Department is not a full-time fire department, it's a part-time fire department?
Correct, 100%.
How big's the city?
We're over 40 square miles. Our fire department responds to about 10,000 emergency calls a year.
Yeah.
So we're a significant size modern day city.
Right. I actually have heard that Roswell is the largest city in the United States vis-a-vis population without a full-time fire department. And that's an amazing thing, you think about it, because public safety is this fire department is held in such high esteem. Mm-hmm. And you guys have done such a great job, police and fire over the years. True. So true. So, Okay, so it's a part-time fire department. So why would I, and it seems to be working, why would I change that? Lee, why would I change that? I mean, from your perspective, what's the urgency to do anything about that?
As an average resident, and again, back to my involvement in the schools, I'll point out a specific incident. I have volunteered at Roswell High School for the 9/11 flag installation for years, and I've always called on our fire chief to come and water the lawn. It's like Beirut out there. You can't get a flag in the ground. And RFD has always come out with the finest. It's always been men, so I don't want to cut out the ladies, but it's always been men. And I've gotten to know, I knew more than most residents did because they were telling me they're from Dawson, they're from DeKalb, they're from Cobb, and from other, even our sister cities. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. Top drawer individuals. But I didn't understand the ramifications if we had a local geographical incident, what that would mean. And so while we love having all of these folks working for us, I've told Chief Pennino, I'm in the poaching business. I want them here full time. I want them here all the time. What I discovered quickly with schooling up from Chief Pennino is the difficulty in scheduling. That's, in my opinion, and you fill in the blanks there, Chief, that's the biggest difficulty is if folks run into overtime in their full-time job and we're waiting on them here, we don't have them in time. So if there were an emergency, we'd be short of staff.
But Lee, it's working now. I mean, like you said, we do get a lot of outstanding
Yes.
Fire department people who are captains and lieutenants, and they're riding trucks, and they're coming to work as part-time. And don't we have the best of both worlds? Why would we change this?
So from my perspective, yeah, the men and women who work here are phenomenal, and we love to, as Councilmember Hill said, retain them on a full-time basis. The problem that we run into is multifaceted. So one, as Councilmember Hill said, if you get held over at your full-time job, at the department, at the community that you're sworn to protect, that leaves a void at the city of Roswell. So if you're retained there for whatever reason, you're on a structure fire call, you can't come here to work, so we have to make do or make other plans and try to figure that out. And that's happening in real time, day of.
Right.
So we have gaps in service from that regard. Also, there's inherent risk relying on a workforce who may have already worked 24 hours at a busy department, whether it's Atlanta or DeKalb. They may have had a structure fire and been up all night. So there is well-documented risk and studies on fatigue. And then the big thing that is impossible to get around is that regional disaster. If we had a regional disaster, whether it was an ice storm or it was a tornado or COVID, as I mentioned, our firefighters are sworn to protect their primary department and those residents. And we certainly couldn't fault them for their departments recalling them back to serve in that capacity, which would obviously leave the citizens of Roswell with quite a void.
So I will share with you, as a resident, when I first found out about this was a compelling reason for me to decide to run for office. But because I was unclear on why, I went back and looked as far back as 2008, when there was a paper that Hatcher Hurd did, and he quoted the then Roswell Fire Department Chief, Ricky Spencer, in 2008. And we had magnificently grown as a city by 2008. And Ricky, at that point, Chief Spencer, said, it's time we have a full-time fire department. And so one of the compelling reasons for me as a resident, I think I ultimately decided to run was, I was convinced as a resident we had to have a full-time fire department because as a responsibility in terms of public safety. And that is not a knock on the fact that, we have a great part-time fire department.
Right.
We do.
Mm-hmm.
But COVID exposed dramatic weaknesses in scheduling. And I'll give you a perfect example. Today is Friday. So Friday, the reality is you may have 100% scheduling, but more likely you're going to probably be in that 75 to 80%. If you're lucky, come Tuesday, you'll have 95 to 100% scheduling, right? Because it's easier to schedule people on Tuesday, vis-a-vis their first-time jobs. But come the weekend, the practical reality is it's much harder. And when you get to hunting season or holidays and or weekends, the city becomes vulnerable just from straight out numbers perspective, staffing perspective. So for me, that's just an equation that we has not only we've not been able to solve it, it's gotten more difficult to solve with all of the issues that everybody's experiencing with labor. COVID really exposed that on us and made the job of scheduling darn near impossible. But the other one was when I found out as a resident and looking at this just purely from a macro perspective, God forbid we ever have a real regional event, terrorist attack, massive storm, real significant damage where the entire region is under assault or in peril. If that were to occur, our city, the city of Roswell of 100,000 people, would not have an adequate response because the full-time fire department that worked in Dawson County, DeKalb County, the city of Atlanta, the city of Woodstock, that's where they would be working because that's their first responsibility. That's their sworn obligation. And Roswell is their second obligation. Mm-hmm. And so the practical reality is, from an elected leadership perspective, right, you are responsible for looking for things that may not necessarily happen, but in their terms of public safety, you want to prevent from happening. And if they do happen, you have a response. And so for me, this was an easy equation.
Absolutely. That
this city must have a full-time fire department. And Lee, thanks to your credit, and starting with the budget in FY23 just passed, we have phased in year 1 of a year 5 implementation plan for a fully funded, full-time fire department in the city of Roswell. Chief, you want to speak? Well, Lee, I want you to speak a little bit up because you have shown such virulent strength and courage in this because it hasn't been received by everybody as something that we need to do. There has been some opposition on this, and you've said, I understand it, but it's the right thing to do for my fellow residents. It's the right thing to do for the city of Roswell, and it must be done. And you've stood firm on this, so I want you to talk about that.
Sure. One of the things that in the first few meetings with Chief Pennino, I discovered was that he, being brand new last year, the first 6 months, from what I understand, correct me if I go astray here, but the first 6 months, you started seeing some things that could use some improvement, maybe a tune-up here or there. And previous council and mayor may or may not have been ready to address some of those. I wasn't here, so I can't speak to that. But rather than standing by and waiting, you got to work. And what I have discovered is the spreadsheets, the data, the proofs, the tracking, the buy-in or no buy-in that you dug deeply into really spoke volumes to it's not when, it's how are we going to do this. That there was really no contest. And that took guts and moxie. And just knowing those things that you have shared with me and have been able to convey that through me and also to the rest of our council and mayor, it's a no-brainer. The residents deserve that, and the fact that you have that kind of expertise to bring to the table to show actually how that would work and why. And then when we've given you a little pushback, i.e., how do we make that happen in the budget? You've been able to lay out a strategic plan on how we can phase that in. And it's less damaging to those that are more resistant to the change. You're in the therapy business now with your staff. You get to manage the feelings and the misunderstanding, if there is any, because whenever you change administration and leadership, it's tough. So I applaud that. I believe you listen to everybody that comes to you with a concern or challenge on the change. So to me, there's not any other option, and it's time. And we've had past leadership acknowledge that. So I am grateful that you were able to bring all the numbers to the table and the proofs to the table. And I'm proud to be behind you on this and make that change for our city, for our residents. And hopefully we won't really feel much of a ripple out in the public. It'll just be something that's flowing steadily as we ramp up over the next several years to a full-time staff. I don't want to lose a single man or woman that's working there now, not one.
Right, absolutely.
Well, talk about the conversion a little bit, because you've been talking about that. You're obviously people who are working at the Roswell Fire Department today that are part-time, right? They're concerned about their future. They're concerned about, will I have a job? What's going to happen? What's the timetable? So you've been having to address that with your folks. Talk a little bit about that and talk about the conversion and what you hope to happen.
Yeah, so communication is always a hang up at the fire department because of different schedules, but even more so when you have a part-time model where people are working infrequently sometimes. So we use a multi-pronged approach to try to communicate. We put out weekly emails to everyone to let them know what's going on, monthly reports, and then recently we shot a video to send out to all of our staff that we sent out via text message, links, and everything else to really let people know what this is going to look like and what it means to them. I was at a fire station just yesterday having a conversation at the kitchen table, which is where all the problems get solved. And someone asked me, someone that's been here for quite a while asked, what is it going to mean for me? And the good news, after I explained to them first, you're going to come here and work full time. And once we sort through that, if they're unable to do that for whatever reason, they plan on retiring or they're obligated to their full-time job. The good news is part of the bad news is that the Roswell Fire Department has a lot of attrition because of the part-time model. But because of that attrition, we're always hiring people. So effectively, those that want to continue to work in a part-time model, in this part-time sense, there'll be room for them over the next few years to continue their employment. But our ultimate hope over the next 5 years as we make this transition, as Councilmember Hill says, is to retain as many of our talented staff as we can. We think that the city of Roswell is going to be able to offer them things, hopefully that their maybe other obligation is not. We believe very much at the Roswell Fire Department about team. And if you come and work here, you're more than a number. You can make an impactful change in the city of Roswell and the Roswell Fire Department as we were working together to kind of build this new full-time fire department from the ground up.
So you mentioned the gap analysis a little while ago, and you kind of mentioned a few of the pieces in the gap analysis. Is there anything else you want to address in the gap analysis that might be important for our residents to know why this is so important to them? Why is it the elected leadership of the city of Roswell, underneath the leadership of Lee, is pressing so strongly about creating a full-time fire department with a 5-year plan? Why, can you mention, there are some other pieces, and there's one piece, you talked about it a little bit, but liability. And talk about how liability manifests itself, particularly through the gap analysis, and how that can potentially affect residents.
So I think liability, to me, one of the big things that's important to a fire chief is the safety of their personnel. And our personnel, there is some liability in a sense that you have 200 or 225 part-time firefighters that are coming from 20 different agencies to work here in different stations and essentially to fill these slots. They're very, very talented individuals, but it's almost like they're playing off different sheets of music because everyone does things differently at their full-time department. And firefighting is a team sport. So when we get on scene of a structure fire, it's important that the crews have trained together and drilled together, just like a sports team or a military unit. They know what they're going to do and they have a plan of attack. And that's very difficult here with people from all the different agencies. And then if you throw in that fatigue factor, where some of them may have been up all night the night before, that does add a lot of liability and risk to what is already a very dangerous situation.
Lee, do you want to touch on it anymore?
I agree with what Chief Pennino said, and it is most residents don't understand that piece of that. Not that they can't understand it, they just don't know. They don't realize that. And this isn't just a little part-time gig. These folks are bringing great expertise and experience to the table. But if you're fatigued, there is risk there.
Well, I think it's, sometimes, some people will use axioms or adages. And for every axiom and adage, there's usually an opposite one. But, the example, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the thing is that you can't see is because we have all these highly trained people, amazing people, they're showing up in the trucks and showing up in shifts. But what you can't see behind the scenes is how many people aren't showing up. Like the scheduling nightmare that's currently in the city. The city residents can't see is that on hunting season, you are literally running below 50% of staff. And that is a threat level. That's a threat to the residents. And it's our job to do something about that. That puts you in vulnerability of being unable to respond the way you need to respond. I'll let you address that.
Yeah, so the staffing is really one of the biggest drivers behind that transition to the full-time model. I think the part-time model, when we transitioned from volunteer, probably worked very well. It was probably a great solution. But as the city grew and we had more spots to fill every day, and you have to cast the net wider and get more and more personnel, in a normal fire department, you're assigned to a shift and you work 24 hours on and then you get 48 hours off. And it's every third day in perpetuity. Here, everyone provides us what their availability is. And as you mentioned, it's more common for people to want to work during the weekday than on the weekends. Mm-hmm. So we have to take all that availability of 200 plus people and use it to build a schedule every 28 days. And then we determine where our gaps are. And then we have to send follow-ups to see if we can fill those gaps. But there is no guarantee. And as you mentioned, there's just a myriad of reasons where we would have low staffing. Anything from playoff games, Mother's Day, Father's Day, St. Patrick's Day. Last year, we had significant issues with staffing on Halloween. And a lot of them, you can't really predict. If DeKalb and Gwinnett counties' spring breaks line up perfectly, you might be at risk of losing a lot of your staffing.
This is so important, and I really want, I want residents to really own this, is that what they can't see is that we're not staffing 7 days a week, shifts continuously at 100%. Correct. And I think if they would feel the same way, if they knew that, they'd say, oh my gosh, aren't you doing that? And if they found out we weren't, they would say, well, do something about it. Mm-hmm. And that's really what this is about. It's about the fact that we cannot staff our fire department fully. And there's not a remedy for it with our part-time model. No. And so it is not a knock on anybody. No, I want everybody to have clarity on this. This is not a knock on anybody, but we do have to remedy the vulnerability that we currently in with our fire department. And that's, we can't fully staff. Mm-hmm. And that's outside of the tsunami of the labor issue that the country is experiencing. Right. It's a challenge that it's almost 100% impossible with our current model to staff, and it's got exacerbated. And the only way that we have deemed to solve that, and the gap analysis deemed to solve that, is come with a full-time fire department. And we're way past time. Yeah. It's way past time for us to do this as a city. I know we could talk forever about this, and we really haven't got a chance to talk about anything else, but this is big. This is a big change for our city.
It is.
It's a big deal. And we brought in the right man, the right leader, to help lead us down this path. And you, Joe, I can't tell you how unbelievably pleased we are that you are our fire chief.
Yes, we are.
We have a fantastic public servant in you. Thank you for your level of professionalism. As Lee has discovered, we are very fortunate to have you as a police chief.
Thank you.
Fire chief. Well, you and Jim are, sorry, kind of inseparable or indescribably the same, but no, we're so happy to have you, brother.
Thank you.
Lee, thank you for your incredible leadership.
Yeah. It's my honor.
It's amazing. This is amazing that you're doing this. Thank you from the residents of Roswell. Thank you from me that you're doing this. This is incredible. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, hey, I'm Kurt Wilson. We've had a chat with our Fire Chief Joe Pennino and with Councilmember Lee Hills, our liaison for public safety over police and fire. I can't thank you enough for being with us today. Welcome, and so long for now for Chats with the Mayor.